Hi, everyone. Ali Madani here with the Atlanta Urban Debate League to explain the cyber negatives disadvantage for international law. Just a recap of a disadvantage structure. We know that it has uniqueness, link, and impact. The uniqueness being a kind of description of the present, a link being what the affirmative plan does to alter that unique situation in the present, and the impact, which explains the consequences of the changes from the status quo. Here in this disadvantage, we have the Goodman evidence, which functions as a unique link, so kind of combination of the first two parts. It's kind of a hallmark of a good piece of evidence in that it contains both parts of an argument that we don't have to just string them together from different sources, but they're all contained here together. And in this piece of evidence, to set us off, we have a kind of description that the change in the current situation from an armed attack, meaning the use of force currently in the status quo, tends to exclude cyber attacks, right? It's a way of kind of describing what is considered an armed attack and what is considered a use of force. And if we were to follow the kind of current state of things, most cyber attacks don't really fall within those parameters. And it's going to argue that this is for good reasons. And specifically, we can turn to the Schmidt piece of evidence, which is our kind of standalone link. And in this case, it says that changing Article 5, which the affirmative does to kind of alter what it means to have an armed attack or a use of force, sets a precedent for how we consider the threshold of what an attack means, right? So if we're to change that to include things like cyber threats and cyber attacks, we have a kind of diminishing of the threshold for what it would take to have a country use force, what it would mean for another country to respond to the use of force within a kind of legal international framework. And by lowering that threshold, we kind of are risking big changes that we might not know the consequences of. But in our case, we have a next component, which is the internal link, kind of half step towards between the link and the impact. And in this case, another piece of Schmidt evidence, which argues that expanding the definition of an armed attack destabilizes international law and allows the early use of force. So if we're able to see international law as kind of providing the framework for what allows us to engage with one another peacefully, how we kind of contain things from containing international conflict from getting out of hand. When we alter that and lower that threshold, it really allows for an early use of force, or allows bad actors to suggest that they've been threatened or that an attack or use of force has already taken place because of something nebulous like a cyber attack. We can't necessarily pinpoint exactly kind of a threat or say an explosion or a bomb being dropped or someone crossing over a national border with the military. In the case of a cyber threat, it's far less easy to pinpoint what exactly has happened. And the Schmidt evidence is saying that that's in fact the point, that if it's less tangible, it's less easy to pinpoint and say that something militarily or something based in the use of force has actually taken place, countries will use that in order to retaliate or to use force earlier than necessary, and that would jumpstart an armed conflict that would escalate. The impact in this disadvantage is the Worth evidence from 2017, which kind of points to a larger and broader destabilizing of international law that would collapse what it's calling the long peace and risk global conflict. It's especially pointing to things like the post-World War II era. It's kind of broader peace between great powers, between countries like the US, Russia, China, and Europe. That peace that has sustained itself for among those countries the last 50 or 60 years, like that would be under threat in a world where cyber threats are included into that change in Article 5. This is kind of a spillover argument because it's not necessarily that cyber itself is the problem, but rather that having changes to Article 5 sets a precedent for how we think about what the threshold of an attack is. And when we have that precedent change, other countries will take that alteration to their own advantage in order to be more be more threatening, be more violent on the international stage. It supports specifically to countries like Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea. Supports and uses experts like Ferguson, Robert Kagan, Fareed Zakaria, and others in order to kind of point to the ways in which things will change in the scenario that the affirmative is suggesting, and that change will be especially bad because the precedent that it sets will destabilize the broader international law and the broader international order that we've been relying on so long to create a kind of long peace. Without that long peace, we risk great power wars, we risk the death of many, and that is a reason to reject the affirmative.